Thor is one of my favorite MCU characters. He's an old soul from a mystic Viking planet, and he's got a pretty badass Uru hammer. What more could a movie-loving geek want in a character? But my adoration for old Goldilocks is a little teeny tiny bit more complex. Thor's one of those mightiest there is characters. He can kill any enemy with a swing of his fists, but doesn't. You know what I'm talking about, right? Thor is basically a distilled version of the eagles from The Lord of the Rings. Whenever something goes wrong in the MCU, everyone asks, why didn't Thor just swing by with his sparkly hammer and blast the bad guys into space? Just like we all wondered why the eagles didn't just drop Frodo off at the summit of Mount Doom at the beginning of the Fellowship of the Ring. When your character is indestructible, there seems to be only two ways your story can go. If you want to write a good story about an invincible superhero, you build threats that aren't just physical. You threaten the hero's relationships, the hero's ego, the hero's environment, since he can only be in a single place at one time. We've seen this time and time again in the great Thor stories. In Kenneth Branagh's first film in the Space God trilogy, Thor bested all of his physical opponents. Ice Giants, the Destroyer, and Loki were all dispelled with relative ease. The biggest battle was between Thor and his own ego. It's deep, I know, and it totally worked. We see it again in Thor Ragnarok. Thor easily defeated Surtur in the opening act and kinda sorta beat up Hulk in the middle. His battle with Hela was the central conflict of the movie, but it wasn't at all a physical one. Thor's conflict with Hela mirrored his own inner conflict. Was he really a worthy hero? Was he really living up to his own legend? Could he ever be great without his hammer? Thor realized he was more than just a dude who had a cool hammer, just like he figured out that Asgard was more than a cool planet. And while Hela did provide some awesome fight scenes, she literally was the personification of death, so I wouldn't fault my boy Thor for losing a time or two. In the end, he realized the fight couldn't be won on the physical plane and accepted that destiny, or in other words death, is inevitable. That's why he encouraged Loki to fulfill the Ragnarok prophecy by lugging Surtur's ugly mug into the eternal flame. Now, those are some pretty awesome ways to create tension-filled tales about a back-to-back alien invasion champion like Thor. The other way to tell compelling stories about him is to nerf his powers, or as I would call it, a bad way to tell stories. You know, because if Thor really were as powerful as he was in the first Thor movie, then there isn't really much justification for the existence of the Avengers. Think about it. Thor shattered an entire ice city with a single lightning blast in the first act of the first Thor movie. How the hell could a Chitauri invasion stand a chance? Or how about an army filled with metal electricity conducting robots in Age of Ultron? Thor was sidelined in Avengers Infinity War for that very reason. It's hard to write a story about such a strong character. You've got to nerf him, kill him, or spend a lot of time crafting the perfect non-physical threats. But it seems like it's a lot easier to nerf these bad boys instead. Just look at our boy in Endgame. And that's the big problem with Thor in the films. His powers are incredibly inconsistent. In Infinity War, he's able to kickstart an engine the size of a dwarf star. And in another, he's manhandled by Curse, the great value brand Hulk of the Dark Elves. It doesn't make sense, does it? As a fan of the films and a fan of the character, this type of inconsistency harms my movie-going experience. I buy into these movies hook, line, and sinker. But among the many different suspension of disbelief-shattering traits of Marvel movies, the fact that a space god who can wreck the Destroyer in 2 minutes can barely muster enough strength to punch a random ground grunt more than a foot makes me lose my mind. Side note, does that piss everyone else off? In almost every movie, Thor, the dude who a few thousand times more powerful than Captain America, barely knocks enemies back when he strikes him. In the Dark World, during the siege of Hogun's planet, Vanaheim, the prison break to release Loki in that same movie, and in the first Avengers movie, Thor would strike enemies and the results would look identical to a poorly choreographed brawl between Kevin Sorbo's Hercules and, unnamed soldier number 13. Alright, back to the main subject. Thor's powers are wildly inconsistent. Inconsistency in any way detracts from the love we feel for our favorite characters. But the reason behind Thor's inconsistencies, the need to artificially deflate him in order to justify the existence of other heroes in the ensemble Avengers films, just riles me up. I mean, this is the freaking god of thunder. Like, this is Thor. He's supposed to be the most powerful one, or at least one of the most powerful ones, at least in comparison to the others. But at the end of the day, we have to understand that they have a movie to write. So if you have basically Thor coming in there and doing, well, they kind of just basically did that with Captain Marvel, now that I think about it. That's really unfair. I didn't even realize that as I was going into this. Wow, okay, so they basically just gave Thor's powers to Captain Marvel in terms of consistency and relevancy and comparison with the other Avengers. Well, I want to know what you guys think about this. Please throw your comments down below. Do you agree or disagree, or just let me know. If you enjoyed this one, hit like, and I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, remember, with great power comes great responsibility.